thrashing like crazy, trying to get a little bit more space in here so we can actually do some other stuff on cars and get back to the Chevelle again. But we are working like crazy trying to get all these LS motors organized and torn apart and figure out what exactly we need to do with all of these things. I want to take you through a couple of these real quick. We're just going to touch base on this real brief, and we're going to tear another one of these things apart, and we're going to see what we find inside of there, and I'll show you a whole bunch of stuff. That's some of the things you could come across on these things when you tear them apart, and things to be aware of is LS1 motor right here, LQ4 motor right here, another LQ4 motor right here. You're going to swing over this way. Here's another 5.3 liter. This is a LM7 motor. This is an L33 motor. Here's one of the things you can come across. Oh, it got dropped. The starter ear broke off of it. This is a brand new L33 block with a broken off starter ear, and I got screwed on eBay on that one. And this one up here is a LC9 motor. Flat top piston, no valve reliefs in it, and that is a 5.3 aluminum block as well. And then go down below is a L92. That is a 6.2 liter. And here's one of the things you're going to come across. Right here we have a lot of cylinder wall pitting in here. So water got inside of those cylinder walls and unfortunately sat in there long enough to pit the cylinder walls. So that will need to be bored out. And this one does too, actually. So this is a 5.3 aluminum block. Beautiful, beautiful cylinder walls and 7 cylinders. One of them has got pitting enough where probably a 20 thousandths bore is what that's going to need now. Crankshafts, all the LS crankshafts, most of them are the same. There's a few different ones with the extended crank style. We showed you one of our earlier videos, but then also the LS7 and LS9 are different cranks. There's quite a few different variations, but most of them have the same stroke. Most of them are interchangeable. Here is one here that came out of the L33 motor that inside of the crank bearing journal is just gone. And that's probably 30 thousandths worn down, so that rod was knocking like crazy. So that crank is probably junk. Probably make some artwork out of that. And then you go into these. You got another LM7 right here. And then another LQ4 motor over here. And we pulled all of those apart, and this other LQ4 motor has got cylinder pitting as well from the same thing, from water sitting inside of those cylinders. So there's 3 of those motors right there that I just showed you that have excessive pitting on the cylinder walls. So you definitely want to take these things apart and take a look at them before you end up purchasing them. Here's some of the other things you can come across. Cam bearings. This cam bearing walked out of our other 6 liter motor, and that was actually all the damage that was done to it. Fantastic way to go. Where it knocked, it set off a code, and then they pulled the motor out and it didn't do any other damage to the motor. So here's another thing you can come across. Some of these lifters can come apart. So after a while, the little clip in here, the retainer clip, can pop apart, and that pops apart, ends up down in your crankshaft and everything. Not a good situation. Also, these rollers right here on your variable valve or your variable valve timing and your on-demand displacement, these can break because they start smacking on the cam from the hydraulic pressure not holding the lifter open, and it just lets them smack against it. So a lot of times it can take your cam out, it can take a lifter out, it can take your cam bearings out. You can also run across this, and you're gonna know this one pretty much right away when you go to get the motor, that a connecting rod, look at how twisted this connecting rod is right there. And that is actually from a hydraulic piston from a injector went bad, hydraulic the cylinder, and it just snapped, bent the rod right there. So those are some of the things that you're gonna come across. And we just picked this one up a couple days ago, actually. This is a L92 motor as well. This is a 6.2 liter aluminum block. And we're gonna do the best we can right now with tearing this thing apart and seeing what we can find inside of it. Mileage unknown. I bought it just like this, so I have no idea what we're gonna run into here. And I thought I got a good deal on it, and let's see if it actually was a good deal. And pull this whole thing apart. So pull off the air conditioning compressor brackets, and I went ahead and I loosened a lot of these bolts up and stuff too, so you don't have to listen to that impact wrench rattling away. I also want to show you this. See that oil that's in there? That came out of a couple of these motors now. There's a lot of chunks and parts and pieces and stuff in there, so there's a lot of your telltale sign stuff too. So if you're going to buy one of these motors, sometimes it's good to pull the pan off of it and check out the oil. And oh, before I forget, any of you guys know what these are for at all? These are on all these LS motors. They're only on the passenger side or the driver's side bank. No hole in them or anything like that. Tell me what those things are actually for. I know what I'm going to use them for from now on, but that is probably not what they were actually used for. I have no idea. I have so many of these LS motors, and I have tons of these things. I don't even know what they're actually for. Crazy, huh? Well, let's pull this thing apart and see what we can find, huh? So, we got the top. This is our VVT, and this is our on-demand displacement deal that fails so miserably. And most of these, this is a hydraulic solenoid holding device and everything. Just pumps hydraulic fluid through oil through there, and it unlocks and locks your lifters out, turns it into a 4-cylinder when you're driving on the highway and you don't need load. So let's go ahead and just pull these bolts off for these heads. And keep in mind, if I'm going to do this to something, I would take and all the lifter galley here, and I would tape that off with rags. I would tape that off with rags and everything so that nothing gets inside of there. But we're going to tear this whole thing apart, so it really doesn't matter. We're going to get some debris in there, but we can clean all that up once we take everything apart here. So, and I also noticed, check this out, when I was looking into this thing, there's a bolt right inside of here. Somebody put some rags inside of there, but there's also a bolt right inside of there. So it really makes you wonder what they were doing when they had everything all apart. And also, actually, if you come around to this side, you can kind of see it. Around the whole back side of the head, and right here, it's really corroded and everything along here. So you can see that head gasket was probably leaking and everything on this motor. So it was probably leaking and dripping down the side of there. So that's going to kind of give us an indicator also of what we might find inside of there. And I have a feeling we might run into some more water damage in the cylinder heads, which is going to be unfortunate because it costs so much more so fast. And remember the last video that we did, I showed you how to rock these bolts back and forth on the exhaust manifold so you don't strip off and break those bolts. There was a couple of them that were broke already from this, but by rocking those back and forth, and why does every bolt always end up in the oil pan no matter what you drop? It's the floor and it ends up in the oil pan. I don't know why, but that's just the rule, I guess. So we're going to take those exhaust manifolds off. We'll crack our heads off. We'll get the take our valve covers off. And we had already, like I said, already dropped these bolts back and forth quite a bit to get them to come loose. So they didn't just grab an impact and zip them like that, because if you do, and they're corroded underneath there, a lot of times you can pull the threads out, you can strip the threads out with it like that. So there is no exhaust manifolds on it. See, the spark plugs broke off, and it had a couple broken off bolts in the holes already, or they got them off. So they are out. But then it also had some bolts that were on the intake, I noticed, are on the top of the cylinder heads that were actually loose. So I don't know if somebody had this thing apart before or what the deal is. So we're going to dig into it a little bit farther, see what we can find. We'll pull our valve covers off. They're just little 8mm bolts. And I didn't get any coil packs with this one or anything, so we didn't have to remove any of that stuff. And whoa, I see something goofy going on already. So we got our rocker cover off, but I noticed the rockers are all crooked on here. Well, for one, they should never do this, and that is definitely something going on there. And the L92s have the intake valves are actually offset. They're hooked like this. They got a offset to them on the L92 square port heads. The exhaust valves are straight, but the intake valves are canted off to the side. So if you're just glancing down at a head and you see the rockers are like that, they're not bent. They're actually supposed to be that way. But we're going to yeah, these are loose completely here. So that's telling me that somebody had their hands in this motor already. And what we're going to find might not be good. So there's all kinds of things that you can run across like that with. So the more research you do on your motor, and we had talked about it previously about, look at this, missing a couple push rods too. Where did those go? So I'm not sure exactly how that works, but yeah, it's missing a couple push rods in this motor. So that is telling me somebody had their hands inside of that thing. Undeniable. And hopefully they're not all crunched up in pieces down in the bottom of there. So we'll need some push rods apparently. Let's pull this other side off and see what this side looks like. Oh yeah, surprise! That's a surprise in not a good way, I guess. Look at this, missing all kinds of bolts. All the rockers are just sitting in here. Yeah, I don't think that's good actually. So, well, let's keep digging and we'll see if we can find. Oh wow, that one's not loose. There's that one. Nope. Looks like they just loosened up a couple of them and lost all the bolts. That was kind of nice. We'll crack those loose with the ratchet. Remember, these things are on there pretty good too, so have an impact that needs new batteries. Actually need a new impact, so that's why it doesn't have enough power to do these. But like I said before, I normally like to crack these loose before I throw the impact on them, so I can kind of get a feel for whether a bolt is galling or it's stripping out. Anything like that, you can kind of feel it. So I'm going to grab these because these will all fall because the bolts are not inside of it. The bolts are inside of it, they'll kind of hold themselves up like that. But the pedestals don't look like they were worn or galled or they came loose. The threads in the head look okay and everything. So let me sneak by here and put those off to the side. push rods. We got all the push rods on this side, it looks like. And those look really nice. They're nice and clean. They don't have oil all built up all over them and cooked to them. So we got all the top ones loose here. And now it's time to crack all the bolts loose for the cylinder heads. We'll just go ahead and crack all these loose. And that was loose already, and I did not do that. That one's loose as well. Yeah, really loose. Somebody was inside of this motor already. And I don't know why they would have put the thing back together. And we're gonna have to just keep digging and see what we can find and cross our fingers that, oh, yeah, that's how tight they should be. Well, that would make sense why that cylinder head was leaking on the other side, but I have a feeling that wasn't the problem. That was somebody trying to figure out what the problem was, and possibly could have been on a warranty situation where it went into the dealer and they dug into it a little bit, and then what would happen is they would save the motor. Oh, if GM would warranty it, they would end up saving the motor. So they just probably put the cylinder head back together, just threw a couple bolts and everything, just so they would have it for a core, so they could send it back to GM if need be. So that happens quite a bit in dealerships where they hold the motor. The dealership will hold the motor for a while. And all right, and remember these bolts too. All these head bolts, factory GM head bolts, are torque to yield. So you can't reuse them at all. Once you take them out, that's it, they're done. And you have to buy new head bolts again. So that's one thing. And if you get into the ARP fasteners and stuff like that, then you don't have to worry about that. Then they're not torque to yield bolts, but they do cost a lot of money as comparatively. So you want to make sure you think of that in your budget when you're building a motor, as if you want ARP fasteners or something, you're gonna pay for them, and they're like 450 bucks for a set of head studs. So, and just being as this side's loose, we'll take this side off. There was also a head bolt here that was, I noticed that when I went and looked at this motor in the first place. And like, that head bolt is missing, it's gone. So that was another hint that somebody'd been in there, and oh boy, that's not a good sign either. See, that is all goo. It's like milky oil, and it's got a very peculiar smell to it as well. So I'm not expecting to see fairies and unicorns come out of this thing. And I have a feeling that what we're going to find is going to be not good. So it looks like that oil was milky as well. So, well, pull that head off. Remember, it's got the dowel pin in there. And, oh, yuck. Oh, goodness sakes. Yuck. That's ugly. That is ugly. Oh, man. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, and look at our heads, too. You know, all our valves are just pitted and everything, too. There was water that sat in this thing, and nasty. That's too bad. So our motor here, we could probably salvage our heads. This block is going to definitely have to be bored out as well. And yeah, that stinks. That stinks. So those are some of the kind of things that you can come across on these motors like that. So depending on how they put them away, how they store them, a lot of times looks like this, where somebody pulls it off. They pull the intake manifold out, they just throw it out in the yard on its side, and it gets water inside of the cylinder heads. And that's the kind of thing that you're going to run into. And when you do, tragedy can be that close by. So this is probably another one that we have. So what is that, 4 now? We have 4 motors that are in here, that 4 of them at least have water damage in the cylinder heads, are in the cylinder walls enough where they need to be bored. So, and then more than likely the pitting on top of the surface right here too might be deep enough where the head or the block needs to be decked. So the block needs to be decked right here. Oh, and here, check these out too, these lifter trays. There's another something I wanted to show you. These lifter trays are they are, remember the VVT on-demand displacement stuff, that the lifter trays are different. They don't all have lifters like this. They have lifters with springs on top of them. Let's see if we can dig those out right now, and I'll show you what they look like. Okay, where did my adapter go? There it is. Remember, these are special bolts as well for these lifter trays, and you're really a one-time use only. You want to take these out and check these lifters out. So these lifters are the on-demand displacement lifters right there. The other ones are just like this. These are the special ones right here. It locks that lifter up, and then the spring lets it follow the cam. And a lot of times what happens is that hydraulic pressure loses it, and it just starts smacking against your camshaft like that and wrecks the cam as well. So there is the lifter for the on-demand displacement. There's your standard lifter that you can replace them with, but then remember, we'll have to plug all these holes or get a different cover for the top of that to get rid of that feature. And but there is exactly what we're talking about before, is these are the kind of things that you can come across that can turn your budget build into, hey, I'm just going to throw some new rings in it and possibly some new bearings, cam bearings or something, and run this motor. And now all of a sudden, boom, look at what you just cost yourself right there. By now it needs to be bored out, it needs new pistons, it needs to be balanced, it needs new rings, it needs the block needs to be decked. You can really get exponentially crazy. The heads have to be disassembled, and possibly some new valves in them and stuff too. So these are the kind of things that can really burn you when you buy a junkyard truck motor that you don't know anything about. So I think we've already torn apart enough of this, and we've already showed you enough of the other ones to kind of wrap this up. And these are the kind of things that you can come across. So be careful what you're buying, and really do your research on what motor is going to work the best in your particular swap application. And it very well might be you're going to be looking for an LS1 motor, an LS2 motor, or something like that that has the right pan, the front drive accessories on it, already has the right intake, it's already got the right computer, all of that stuff might be beneficial for you rather than buying a junkyard truck motor and getting burned on things like this. So hope you guys like what you learned today, and don't forget, we got some really cool stuff. We're gonna start building some of these things up. So we're gonna tear them down, build them up. We got them almost torn down. We're gonna build these things up, and don't forget to stay tuned for that.